Hub, and as you know at Collision Hub, we are passionate about social media and what it can do for your business by growing new customers, engaging with your existing customer base, and taking your business to markets maybe you never thought of before. And the best part about social media, it's all within your reach, and there's really no cost to it involved. But unfortunately, sometimes we've learned over the course of the last several years, some people in our industry have gone down that road and found that it's gotten them in a lot of trouble and maybe caused some detriment to their business or to their employees, or found out that there's some violations with their human resources department. So we wanted to take a time to talk about these situations. Social media is definitely something you want to do, but you got to do it the right way, and having a strategy and a plan in place that involves the human resources departments, legal, anyone there is what you got to do to be successful. So we've asked Darren Fristow to join us. Darren is, as you guys know, one of the best experts in our industry on human resources for collision repairs and some of the legal issues that come up with employees, to talk a little bit about how social media affects employer and employees and those relationships.
You know, you talk about our workplace, you talk about the changes in our workplace right now, and really this is the biggest one in terms of what do we do with our employees, how do we handle how they manage the business, how do they handle the information that flows through it, and what's the exposure to the business now based on technology. That's where we are. Technology's on our hip now. You know, this isn't the good old days where we had a better sense of control as to what our employees said about us, what information they disseminated, how they disseminated it. Now things go viral in a second. If I decide to have a grievance with you, I can tell everyone right now via social media.
Right.
And I can package the image, and I can package the message as an employee. So what we want to talk about today is really the exposure for the business itself. We want to talk a little bit about the employment management role and how the consistency comes into play. And really we want to talk about the business reputation, because that's why we're here. Social media is another way, and the networking tools that are out there are another way that employees can either hurt or harm or help your business.
Right.
So by helping your business, they can promote who you are and what you are and how you do it. They can also do the exact opposite. They're wearing your colors, so to speak. They're wearing your uniform.
Right.
So the reality check for our employers today really is, it's here. Technology happened, and it's happened on our watch. I've been in the workforce 24 years now, so my job started before the internet. My job started with rotary dial phones. My job started with everything handwritten, phone calls, and direct mail. That's what we did. That's how we communicated, and face-to-face meetings. That's not our world now. Our world now is immediate. Our world now is, how do we handle what we do quickly? And how do we handle it with the right emphasis? And how do we handle it with tonality? And what does that look like if it's a text? What if it look like if it's an email?
Right.
It's different.
And I think it's important for people to know that this isn't just about having a cell phone use policy at work.
Right.
This
Absolutely.
goes well beyond just how they're using a phone or maybe something that's attached to them when they're on your property. This goes, when they go home as well.
Oh, it's 24/7.
Yeah.
Again, if your employee uses your property, if your employee uses your cell phone, uses your email address, or frankly, if they send out information about you using their own, all of a sudden there's an exposure if they're using their own tools. So when you think about the technology that's happened, and you think about the immediacy that happens with viral information and communication, then you combine, how do you attach it to the employment world? How do you attach it to who we are and how we handle what we do in our information? And then you talk about the liability that's expanded for an owner and operator. It's a hugely, hugely growing area of significant exposure for a business depending on what someone said and how they communicated that.
In a rapidly evolving legal environment, I think some of the studies out there say this year and next we're going to see lots of legal cases on employee relations and communications involving social media. It's kind of something the courts are really trying to get some hands around, and we'll see some precedents set later this year that I think a lot of us are waiting to see what happens, because we're curious how the court's going to interpret it.
And it'll change. I mean, the other thing is technology is changing so rapidly that we have to understand and we have to manage ourselves and be ready with policies, procedures. How do we handle the situations as they arise, and communicate with our employees, making sure our employees don't have the ability to decide what's right and wrong on their own.
Right.
Because you want to control the message. As I mentioned before, they're wearing your colors, so to speak. So if they're using your email address, you want to make sure they're sending the right message. You also need to understand that old adage that's out there. Picture whatever they send blown up on an easel in court. If it's completely inappropriate, would you want it posted on the wall in the office? Would you want it sent via inter-office mail or email? No, you wouldn't. And you certainly wouldn't want it as an offensive document or diagram on the wall in the court.
Right, that's a biggie. We always talk to people when we're consulting clients about, would your CEO say it? Would he look at it? Would he post it on his wall? And if the answer is, yeah, I don't know,
right.
Then you want to pay attention to that. And then we find a lot of times that people don't really read the links they're sharing.
Right.
So they'll find what they think is a really cute story and they'll post it on their wall, but they don't really click it to go in there and see what's attached to that story. What embedded commercials are in that story, what things that are there, because when you attach that link, you've attached your name to it. You've put your stamp of approval on it. Bob's Body Shop believes in this link. And then I click the link and it takes me somewhere you probably didn't know I was going to go. And now I'm like, what did Bob do to me?
Well, it's also viruses that happen. It's Trojan horse situations that can happen to your system. It's a bandwidth problem that happens. If you send a file that is so significant, so large, that it slows down the system, you can see that internally. Your IT people can see it, your coworkers can see it, and that's a problem. It's a business killer for a lot of reasons. So let's say it is appropriate, but it's such a file that you shouldn't send anyway. That's created a whole nother problem. So that's an information issue. That's an electronic communication issue. When you talked earlier about having a policy and procedure, and we'll talk about that in a minute, I would argue you do. Just like you have a handbook, you have this as part of it. This is a new nuance. That's why the handbook is really a fluid process, because you can't imagine, 24 years ago I couldn't imagine we'd be here today, that you would have everything on your hip if you wanted it, and you can't. So the revolution happened. I mean, for lack of a better way to put it, the social media revolution happened. The tools are out there. If you think about Google and what information you can find out right now about anyone, about anything, immediately you can do it. And if you want to communicate to thousands, millions of people in an instant, you can do it via Twitter, via instant messaging, via email. Depending on how you want to reach someone, you can do it if you want. And even longer than that are blogs. So when you talk about an electronic communication policy, and you talk about corrective behavior in your business, make sure that if someone's posting a blog, you know what they're saying, because it's a longer form of communication that lives on and on. Again, if you think about where we used to be and where we are now, this communication goes viral, means it's everywhere, and people keep it and keep pushing it out, and it never goes away.
No, it's always there. I get surprised a lot of times when I'll sit down and talk to repairers and even corporations, some of these large Fortune 500 corporations that may be outsourcing their messaging, their social media, their blogging, hiring ghostwriters, etc.
Right.
And they have no idea what's posted in their name until we have a problem, which is what spurred this conversation between you and I. We actually had a client with a problem a couple weeks ago from a third party.
Right.
And it was one of those things where we had never thought about that. Well, okay, now let's go back and let's get you strategies, let's get you a playbook, and let's start over.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you talk about the sins of omission and commission, right? And so the business allows emails or inappropriate communications to happen, and they don't do anything about it, then they validated it. They've made this okay, again and again and again. And so you go backwards and say, we need to have a policy or procedure, but we also need to understand there may be a value add to this. Social networks out there right now as part of the social media program. You've got MySpace, you've got LinkedIn, you've got Facebook, you've got a number of different ways to go. I have had clients who have mandated that their employees friend each other on Facebook. So you have to understand what that means, because it is a language out there that's in and to itself. You have to understand some of the acronyms. Heaven knows our business is heavily in the acronym world, but there are acronyms out there. You have to understand what people are saying and why. And you need to have a better grasp of that in this world we're in right now. So how do we use it? What do we do in terms of personnel, as this relates to personnel, the employment background checking world, let's say? Let's say you were going through the process of, to direct us all the way down to our world, you want to investigate 2 candidates for hire. You want to know about their background, right? So what happens is, in the old days, you'd make phone calls, you'd check references, you would go through the process of a job history check, you may do a drug check, you may do a driving record check. You do all of these things that were hard skills. You go through effective interviewing practices and make sure this is the right candidate. Today, with technology and all the tools we just mentioned, it can happen immediately. It can happen immediately. And there are a number of reasons that is happening for us now. The workplace has changed. Speed is in play. communication is in play, technology is in play, and there's an overflow of qualified candidates. So human resource people or hiring managers are vetting candidates rapidly, sometimes on information that may not be valid. And that's one of our challenges too, with social media and with the tools that are out there. So
you hear a lot about that now, where they either, I went on and checked your profile and you're chugging a bottle of whiskey, I don't think I want you in my company car. And, and is that, can I do that? And is that get me in a problem? And we've seen employees now get terminated for what they're saying on their Facebook pages, etc. So.
Well, and that's the other challenge, depending on how the business wants to use those tools. Your business may have a Facebook page, and so you may want all the employees to like the page so that it's promoted out there for marketing purposes. Different animal than we're talking about right now. We're talking about employees posting things that they shouldn't, knowing better but doing it anyway. We're talking about employees or candidates for employment that put things on a Facebook page or LinkedIn or somewhere else that you may not want to know. And we're also talking about whether or not it's appropriate usage for an employer to look. The worst case scenario, just like anything else, we're looking for consistency in what we do. I have 2 candidates for employment. I decide to look at your Facebook page. I see pictures, I see groups you're a member of, I see things that you've done, where you've been, but I don't check the other candidate out. So for one reason or another, I made a choice. That is pure discrimination. So in the hiring practice, being consistent is one thing. There are certainly, as you mentioned before, employment law challenges coming as to what you can or cannot look at and how much of it you can. What's private and what's not. That's a huge area. So for us, as you're going through risk management as it relates to social media, which is what we've talked about in the past, risk management means defensible position for the business, understanding the policy, understanding how your employees should communicate or should not communicate, and using what tools. And make sure it's documented. If we preach anything and every time we're together we talk about documentation, that's what you need to do. Here's the policy, here's what it means, sign off, and make sure they understand. And then you communicate it, and then you communicate it again, and then you repeat, because that's what you do.
And I think that would go for, and I know we started talking about the external messages as well, but if you're going to consider someone else in being involved in your social media marketing and campaigning, that same steps that you take with an employee to say this is appropriate, this is not appropriate, this is what I expect, this is what I don't expect, you expect from those people as well.
Right. So, you can drill this all the way down to even a template. This is what we say and how we say it. This is a communication process. There's certainly a number of clients that don't allow their employees to use any of these tools with a company email or on company property. But again, our challenge is bigger than that. Our challenge is this is available on your phone, whatever these tools are that we want to use. So how we figure out how our employees are doing the right thing on a regular basis, it all flows through performance management, it all flows through communication in the business and how it works. So it becomes a performance management issue. It becomes a validity of information issue. Again, if I investigate you and I see something that may or may not be right, and I use that to your benefit or your detriment, either way it's wrong. And either way it's bad management. It's bad personnel management, but it's also not managing the business effectively. And it's a disservice to you. I know I've had a client who promoted someone based on what they learned on the outside versus the inside. Meaning they went outside and found information. Internally, shouldn't have done it, but they did it. And that's an ineffective use of the technologies that are out there. Because it's out there, and it's not going away. So your employees may ask you, what if I'm at home? What if I'm off duty? What if I'm doing whatever I do off peak hours? It's a challenge for an employer depending on what you've dictated internally. This is a new phenomenon. This has happened, the last 2 years, this has exploded. So heaven knows what later this year brings.
A lot of these cases a couple of years ago, they just started to bubble up, and now we're going to see those court dates this year where discovery's over and it's go to trial. And so there's a lot of human resources people like I know you and some of us like, because for what we do with consulting, waiting on the Oscars going, I really want to see where this is going to go.
And did an employer, especially in your world, did an employer sign off on what you said? Or what you didn't say? And what impact did that have? And again, where this expansion of liability happens. We talked earlier about what a business person has to do to control the message. You can only do what you can do. So if I control the message and I tell people what they can't do, what they can't use, where they can't go, and I hire a vendor and don't tell them any of that, that's my fault. The business owner needs to dictate what the vendor's doing.
Yeah, I've seen some situations where I think we forget sometimes how connected our world wants to be.
Absolutely.
So like I'll come to an event and then I'll go home and I'll have a bunch of friendship requests on Facebook.
Right.
And I'll have a few friendship requests on LinkedIn, and you got to go, okay, I'm going to accept these people or not. And your employees really are doing the same thing.
Yes.
So I've seen a situation where a representative with a particular company, and he has lots of relationships across the business on his Facebook page that are professional, but they have access to the page.
Right.
And you're at home on a Saturday working with something, you happen to be working with a tool, and that tool's not working for you the way you like, and you make a post, this hammer is horrible. We'll just say hammer.
Right.
Let's go with hammer. This hammer is horrible. And then by Monday morning when you get to the office, it's, CJ Tools says CJS's hammer is horrible. Well,
right.
No, CJ Tools didn't say that. Bob said that on Saturday in his garage. Bob is CJ Tools.
Right. Right.
So, and he just disparaged a competitor's product, and now we've got a problem that we didn't think we had.
And now we're exposed.
Yep.
Again, you do what you can do to make the business hum. You do what you do to make it sustainable and viable. You're doing a good job. You're doing good work. You're working with the customers. You're working with the clients and the vendors. Everything's working, and one stray, absolutely stupid comment or email or communication of some kind can kill it for you.
Yep. Yeah, I'm having a hard time getting something to cure for me on Saturday. I just really can't say that because then I'm going to get a call.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Kristen
exactly
doesn't
right.
like your product. No, I love your product.
That's right. And how many people have heard it? And then all of a sudden, especially as you see the media, whether it's Facebook or whether it's LinkedIn, we'll just use those two as an example, liking or not liking or unfriending or joining or who's a member of what group or who pulled out of what group, or who hides comments that are out on these various pages. It's a real interesting exercise. So when you think about my employees are doing whatever they're doing, why aren't they working?
Yeah.
Because you know when they're posting. You know when they're out there looking. You can see who's looking on occasion and when. What happened to productivity? Yeah. If this is a job where they're at a desk all day and they're on Facebook, they're on LinkedIn, they're on Google, wherever they are, arguably, that's not their job. But is there a business case as to why there should be their job or part of their job? As part of your world, how do we brand and promote the brand? Mm-hmm. Well, how do I use all of my employees as my best salespeople?
Right.
Or my worst?
Best salespeople are cheerleaders too, yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
And they have to be informed, and they have to have the tools to do what they need to deliver the message. So when you think about a valid business case, one valid business case a number of my clients use, they encourage their employees to use LinkedIn so that they push themselves out. They're members of the right groups, as you can do in LinkedIn. So your communication increases dramatically. We talked about technology, we talked about communication flow, we talked about speed to market. All of these things happen in the moment using those tools for the better of the unit, for the better of the business versus not. So you can talk about testimonials. You can talk about external messaging. You can talk about what is the most cost-effective opportunity for you to push the message out with a number of voices versus just yours. That's your challenge.
Great opportunities.
Yeah. Well, I think when you think about other reasons and other ways you can use it in terms of the personnel world, there are a number of nuances now in terms of social media screening happening. So you have employers now using tools that are social media screening for pre-employment testing, meaning the Google type investigations, the Facebook type investigations, the LinkedIn type investigations. Those are questionable as to whether or not those will always be legal, but they certainly are now. We also have that phenomenon now, which is the post-hire monitor. Well, that's always really been there, okay? Because when you think about it, I can know when you're doing something inappropriate. If I'm in a business and I have an IT department, they can monitor what's coming and going, what's happening, when, bandwidth usage, and where you visit. They can track what you do on the sites. So that's always been there, but now it's becoming more and more prevalent as technology becomes more easy to use. It's sort of that ghost in the machine.
Right.
If you have a ghost in the machine, I know where you've been, what you've done, and what you haven't done. And I also know that you're not working.
But it's going beyond that for what I think a lot of employers, we've heard these cases recently where they're not necessarily monitoring an employee's behavior online after hours through their systems, they're just monitoring them on their own.
Right.
So they happen to look at the employee's Facebook page at 10 o'clock on a Friday night, and that employee's made a post about, I hate my boss.
Yep.
And then they terminate that employee on Monday morning for making statements about a boss or alleging to a hostile work environment. It's just some crazy things where we're monitoring in the different places and convincing people that what you do is who you are, and what you type is who you are, and it's always there, and we're always going to see it.
It's your profile. When you think about those two sites and you think about profile, that is your profile. You have now changed who you are in the eyes of whomever these recipients are. It's the same thing on texting or Twitter. Those messages go immediate. You can sit here right now and while we're together and text 100 times while we're sitting here. Or send a Twitter message. And so the challenge is what message is going, who's getting it, what does it mean, and is it something that's absolutely inappropriate? Is it something that exposes the business? And frankly exposes you as somebody who really doesn't know what they're talking about or has done it so poorly that you've exposed the business in a detrimental way.
Exactly. And it's important that shops have these. And I love that we're having this conversation about setting that strategy, because it's one of those things where it's time to call everybody back in and have a sit down.
I think so.
And really get the employees on the page and have them know what you're thinking and why and what you expect of them, and let them tell you what they expect of you.
I think they have to. And I also think it's important, we talk about communication through every time we've been together, and communication is so critical for your employees, but telling them why you're doing what you're doing. You're really doing a balancing act right now. You're really going through the process of what are the employees' rights, and what is the best use for the employer? What do they need to know? How do they need to know it? And how can we work together to get the message out? A number of clients don't let their employees do anything in that area, don't even let them have a Facebook page. That happens, and you can certainly mandate that as an employer. It's an interesting way to do it given the fact that technology is not going away. So then you have to figure out, how much do I check it? Because now I've added a layer of things I'm expecting my employees to do or not. It's a challenge. As we've talked a number of times about processes and handbooks and so forth, an electronic communication process or policy is very, very, very important right now. And that is one where you're not only talking about cell phones, as you mentioned before, you're talking about the gamut. And the problem with all of this is we can put all of those names of all the tools we just mentioned, and a new tool will be out tomorrow or later today. So you can't really imagine everything that can happen, but you can imagine the process. You can imagine how they should use what they should use. And you can imagine if you think it's questionable, don't do it.
Right.
It's the best advice you can give.
Right. If there's just a little hesitancy, don't do it, or come see me.
I think so. It's the messaging that you're putting out there. And again, using social media as a marketing tool, as a branding tool, this all comes into play as it relates to human resources. When you talk about a human resource policy, you get IT involved, you get marketing involved, and sales involved to make the best end product. That's what we're trying to do. One situation that I've run into now, and it's certainly out on the internet to see, but the Gap has done a very good job of having a proactive approach to telling their employees generally what to do and how to do it. What they've done is they use 3 bullet points, very basic. The first one is to keep in mind. Okay? Keep in mind that the internet is global, so it's going everywhere. It's real baseline stuff here, right? But you make it easy. That's what you do in a policy. They also talk about the fact that once it's out there, you can't make it go away. You can delete it, but it's already out there, and other people already have it, wherever it is. It happens. Another thing is, make sure you understand when you're posting something that not all topics are received the same way. And some topics are inflammatory immediately. There's no reason to go there. So all of a sudden, not only have you been not productive, you've been counterproductive. Okay? And I think finally, remember that we're trying to work in an environment of mutual respect. That's what we do in the workplace. So understand and respect other people's stuff, other people's area, other people's world. When you talk about those things you don't talk about at a dinner party, and you talk about the things that you don't put in an email, religion and sex, and you think about the taboo areas, think about that with that filter. Think about what we don't want to talk about, that is divisive, that is discriminatory, that absolutely impacts the listener. It doesn't matter what you intended at all. It matters what they heard and how they took it. And it's a different lens. We have speed to market. I think we have to think twice as long before we communicate now versus not. Because I think one of the most wonderful things that you can use before sending an email is save draft. If you're in the moment, think about it. Don't send that text. Don't send that email if you're in the moment. Think about it, save it, send it later.
And that's one of the most important things when we're consulting and we're talking to people about building their plan. It's building your communication plan out for the week. And a lot of times we'll tell them, if some things are going to happen that you're going to want to share, like we're donating a car to Recycle Rides, and you want to take that picture and put it immediately out in the social media world. But having a plan of communication, not just a plan for our overarching goals of how we're going to run our media, but this is our weekly plan, this is our monthly plan. Lets you vet those postings and ideas and think about them. So there's not a lot of spur of the moment. It's Monday, I need to post something. Geez, what am I going to post? This article looks good. Let me get that out there. You've thought it through.
Again, it's counterproductive. We don't have the luxury of, I liken it to the ripples in the pond, right? You throw a rock in the pond and you get the ripples. You don't get to pick which ripple to pay attention to. You have to pay attention to all of them, and sometimes in sequence. And so the challenge is if the messages go out wrong or they're inappropriate, now you're doing damage control. Now you're going through the process of, he didn't really mean it, he didn't really know what he was talking about, he doesn't work here anymore. I mean, there are a number of things that can happen because you did something that was inappropriate. So, getting back to the Gap, they have another step. Another step is, how do we be the best? So we talked about step 1 is keep in mind. Step 2 is how to be the best. And how to be the best means play nice, be yourself. If you make a mistake, own up to it and fix it, and let people know. Value what you do and how you do it, and add value when you communicate. That's the metric that they use. And really the third step is the area of don't even think about it. Okay? Don't talk about the company's financials. Don't talk about the company's strategies. Don't talk about the company's internal processes. Don't do it. And don't get in a fight online.
Yeah, we don't need you to defend us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're fine.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because all of a sudden you've overstepped your bounds.
Yeah.
I think one of the most interesting things that are out there right now is how do we elevate the dialogue without inflaming? How do we elevate the dialogue without putting ourselves in a position of exposure for the business? And social media is a wonderful, wonderful way to do it, as long as we understand the end result, as long as we have a plan, as long as we manage the business and the process.
Right. The beautiful thing about it is it's that invitation of that two-way communication. We finally have given our customer a way to talk back to us, and so sometimes it's about us listening and not talking as much.
Absolutely.
And that urge to defend. And I get a lot of feedback from shops that they're nervous about Yelp or Facebook or whatever. What am I going to do if a customer makes a negative post? Well, you'll do it the same way you would if a customer made a negative complaint to your office. But you definitely don't want those employees who have friended your pages or are following or whatever to jump in there and go, that's not the case. I don't need you for that.
Yeah.
Got this covered. So making sure that's outlined, buddy.
You got to control the message. You really do. And I think our challenge going forward will be, how do we manage technology as rapidly as it's changing? I mean, this immediacy of communication now is a scary thing. And for us as employers especially, how do we understand it? And how do we understand the language that goes along with it and the technology? Managing the business, managing the people, managing the message.
That's what we have to do. So it's definitely something to keep doing though.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a great form of communication.
It will never go away.
Yeah, it's just like press releases though. We had a way in the old days where we vetted those press releases and we got them all through legal and everything was approved and we'd send them out. Social media can be the same way, still be instant, still be up to date, still be relevant and current, but you just got to think about it in the right way.
I think that's the best point. I think the fact that we talk about all these processes doesn't mean it's slowed it down.
Yeah.
We're not slowing it down. What we're doing is making sure it's compliant, making sure we're in a defensible position, making sure we control the message and the brand. You're absolutely right. If you have a process in place, you're ready to go.
Any tips, tricks that repairers or even corporations right now, as we've kind of jumped into the social media hot tub without checking the water first, a lot of us.
In a time.
What are some just quick things they can do to maybe get themselves back on track, or maybe get a plan if they launched but didn't have one?
I always go back to the baseline of documentation. So I would argue that you need to have a manual. You need to have an electronic communication policy that addresses not only cell phones, but every type of medium where your employees can communicate with the customers, with the clients, with each other internally. Make sure that you have the messaging controlled, not in terms of inhibiting communication, but making sure that you understand there's a policy in place, your employees know it, it's fluid enough that it keeps changing as the business changes. Make sure they sign off on it, and everyone knows the rules of the road.
Yeah, social media has just really rapidly changed our industry, and while collision repair is still statistically out there, remain low on the activity board of
Right.
Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, we're picking up rapidly, and more shops are launching into collision repair Facebook presences on a daily basis. It's not something to avoid. It definitely can be a great tool, a marketing tool, an engagement tool for your business, but you got to think about it the right way. And while it's an informal type of communication, it's still formal to you because it's business. So make sure whoever is controlling that in your business has gone over the policy, has a policy in place, understands what's appropriate and what's not, and really grasps that they are speaking with your voice. That's why we strongly encourage you to maintain control of your Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and all social media presences. There's a lot of third parties out there that want to manage that for you, but you don't want to be a client. You really want to make sure you're picking a partner that understands the legalities and some things, what's good, what's bad to say, understands your community, because what may be an appropriate post for Texas may not be an appropriate post for a business in Oklahoma that maybe just experienced a tornado and there's been some deaths or whatever there. So be sure that you have control of that message. And if you want to know any more information on human resources issues or legal issues involving social media, be sure to contact us on the website. You can always reach Darren at the Fristow Group. He'll be happy to take a look at anything that you have, offer you some suggestions and consulting on how you can best align your company's current employee handbooks and communication guidelines with what's changed in our industry today. Thanks.